This is the River Avon in the south of England, the Hampshire Avon to be exact, which rises in Wiltshire and eventually reaches the English Channel in the town of Christchurch. On a map, this forms a 96-kilometre path which meanders through long farm pastures, passes by large listed estates, and is flanked by various prehistoric sites, including Stonehenge itself. Nearby the River Avon are endless other rivers, roads, and walking trails which form their own unique paths. Rivers like the Kennet, the Bourne, and the Thames, or walking trails like the Wessex Ridgeway, the Great Stones Way, and the Wayfarer's Way. And these all vary in terms of length, landscape, and history, but the one thing that they have in common is that they all create some sort of unique line or path that can be followed. And it's these types of lines or paths that have been the backbone of so many classic photography projects over the years, some of which are my favorites. So in today's video, I want to talk about this concept of the path and why it might be the answer you're looking for if you're lacking direction with your own work. So over the years, as my photo book collection grows, I'm constantly discovering new favorites and just really enjoying kind of each photographer's unique way of looking at the world. And one book that I picked up recently, it's one that I've wanted to get my hands on for a while now. This was recently put back into print as well by RRB Photo Books here in the UK. And this is Jem Southam's The Red River. And as I spent some time looking through this over the past couple of weeks, it made me realize that so many of my favorite projects and books from other photographers kind of take this same approach where they follow like a specific line or a specific path. And I wanted to make a video and explore this a bit and talk about it because I think it's an approach that can be so helpful if you're struggling to find direction with your work, but it's still very malleable and almost endless in its creative potential. So today we're going to take a look at 4 different examples that follow this approach. So to kick things off, we're going to jump back to 1980. The first one we're going to start with is The Great North Road by Paul Graham. So this book is one of my absolute favorites, and as the title suggests, uses the A1 as its path to follow. So if you're unfamiliar, the A1 was the first major road to run the entire length of England and into Scotland, stretching almost 400 miles. And Paul Graham talks about his connection to this route as he used to travel from south to north when visiting family during his childhood. He chose to focus on the A1 over a 2-year period, documenting the people and places he discovered during his travels. The book begins in the south with an image made in London of 2 young executives, and from there it travels north, presenting us with a variety of images with things like portraits and truck stops, a Bible in a driver's bedroom, flooded fields and a hedge in the wind, with the final image, and one of my favorites, being made in Edinburgh, where the road ends. So with this book, you have this very clear path, the A1 road that it follows going from south to the north, but the road itself isn't the main subject. It's not at the forefront of every image. It's almost like it provides the route to follow and then focus shifts to what's discovered along the way. And that's a common theme with all of these projects we're going to look at today. The next book we'll look at is The Red River by Jem Southam. So I wanted to look at this one next just because there are some direct links between both photographers and both projects. Back in the early 80s, Jem and Paul were actually working out of the same space in Bristol, and that is when both of these projects came to life. And in the afterword, in The Red River, Jem says, Paul and I would chat about work and ideas, and partly out of this discussion came the notion of making a work following a geographic thread or line. Paul announced one day he was making a work following the A1 from London to Edinburgh, coming across the thin red stream, coursing through the lush grasses, settled where my attention would lie for the following years. And being a big fan of the A1 work, I actually wasn't aware of Paul and Jem's relationship and their influence on one another until I read that afterward. And it's just really interesting to see them take the same approach and work on these projects at the same time. And I think it's a great example of how different the end results can be just based on the photographer's unique vision. So just like with Paul's book, The Red River starts at one end and finishes at the other. In this book, it opens up actually a few thousand yards from the start of the river with a place called Black Rock, and eventually ends at the coast as the river flows into the ocean. And in between, we have this journey broken into sections, which explores both the wider landscape and also more intimate and personal details throughout the environment. In contrast to Paul Graham's work, which covers a 400-mile section of road, the area that the river occupies is fairly small, but the variety and depth of images are quite vast. And honestly, that's one of my favorite things about this project. It's this incredible reminder that you don't need a road trip to go and find interesting subjects. And there's a good chance if you slow down your pace and look a little closer, you'll probably find a depth in your local surroundings that you've been missing. So fast forward 15 years later, and that brings us to the next book, another favorite of mine, Alex So's Sleeping by the Mississippi. And this is obviously a very well-known project, but it's a really great example of a photographer using a specific path to influence where they go and what they focus on. Obviously, the Mississippi River being the path for this. And again, the project starts at one end and finishes at the other. The first image is in Minnesota with the frozen river in winter, and the final image is at the end in Louisiana, the furthest that South could travel by car. In between, we're presented a wide range of images, environmental portraits, interior details, landscapes, and then we also have these recurring motifs, crosses, and also mattresses or beds. Just this incredible variety of images that were discovered by following this path. And the final book to reference, fast forwarding almost another 15 years, is one called Temps Log by Chloe Dewey Matthews. This is a book that I've had for a couple of years now. It's also become a favorite of mine. As you might guess, the path in this one is the River Thames here in England. But it's about more than the river itself. Specifically, it documents our relationship with water, how we interact with it, and also how it influences us. So Temps Log, just like the others, is an end-to-end journey, with the first image being of a honeypot at the source of the river, and the final image being at the Thames estuary. In between, we're presented with everything from ship spotters to Morris dancers, commuters going to work, and even more intimate moments like ashes being scattered or religious gatherings and rituals. I also love the design of this book. So it uses what is called, I believe, a French fold. So every single page is connected and it creates this continuous flow, kind of mimicking a river. But yeah, just a great project with an immense amount of variety and depth to it that goes far beyond the initial path it follows. And for me, that's one of the most important takeaways when I look at these specific projects or any others that take this approach. It's this path that can almost act as like a vehicle to take you to specific places and force you to look at them closer than you would have otherwise. And I think when we do that, that's when we make some of our best discoveries. In Paul Graham's book, for example, he says, the A1 granted the freedom to photograph whatever and wherever. Portraits, interiors, still life, landscapes, truck stops, transport bed and breakfasts, sunsets and gray skies, the wind-moving hedgerows or rain-smeared forecourts, all and everything could be embraced along the way. On Mac's website, when talking about Sleeping by the Mississippi, they say, the Mississippi is less the subject of the book than its organizing structure. Not bound by a rigid concept or ideology, the series is created out of a quintessentially American spirit of wanderlust. Jem Southam, when talking about making images for the Red River, specifically at the start, when he was taking a more topographic approach, says, I swiftly became dissatisfied with the role of a detached observer. One day, I imagined the camera and I flowing down the slope, through the fates, across the fields of the farms and small holdings, over hedges, into the gardens and homes below, describing more intimate aspects of the distinct culture of the valley. In the opening essay for Temps Log, it says, the images in Temps Log enter the river's current again and again, retrieving experiences from the flux, even though the main subject may remain merely a hint. And after planning this video and writing it and just thinking about this concept a bunch, I wanted to just experiment with it very briefly. And that brought me to the place that I mentioned at the very start of this video, the River Avon. And this is an area and surrounding landscape that actually isn't that quite far from me, that I've passed through many times, but never gave it a thought in terms of its potential for photography. So I decided to spend a day driving the length of the river, starting at the source and ending up at the sea, purely as a way to investigate the landscape. And doing this simple exercise, this place that in the past has seemed pretty common to me, all of a sudden it seemed like there were opportunities everywhere. As an example, just north of where the river rises is a place called Silbury Hill, the largest artificial prehistoric mound in Europe. And a short distance away from that is a place called Avebury, home to the world's largest prehistoric stone circle. So 2 incredibly interesting features in a very small area. And from there, during my drive, every town, farm, business, and even woodland now became its own unique subject, waiting to be explored. The possibilities seemed endless. And this actually inspired me afterwards to look at my local area a little bit more closely. And over the next few weeks, I found myself just immersed in locations I normally wouldn't visit and creating images with a bit of a different view. It's been a connection that has been incredibly refreshing. So if you've been struggling with your photography to find excitement, to find direction, just to find something you're happy with, I would highly encourage you to give yourself boundaries to work within by following some sort of path or line. I think it's an idea worth exploring, and you might surprise yourself with what you discover. Anyways, that wraps this one up. I hope you enjoyed this look at these 4 projects and this chat about this idea. Highly recommend all of these books. They're some of my favorites from my collection. I'll link to them below if you're interested in checking them out. And other than that, just want to say thank you for watching, and I will see you very soon.